Welcome to Joy of the Hang. I'm your host, Sharon Stevenson. Today's guest has spent over 40 years changing the lives of children and families across America. Connie Going is a powerhouse in the world of adoption and child welfare, an advocate, speaker, and mom whose work has touched hearts on The View, CBS On the Road, People Magazine, and more. But beyond the accolades, Connie's story is one of unconditional love that shows up through trauma, loss, and the long road to belonging. She's adopted older children herself, walked beside birth parents through heartbreak, and continues to fight for every child to have a permanent, loving home. In this conversation, we talk about what it really means to parent through pain, why the system needs radical transparency, and how compassion, not paperwork, is what truly changes lives. So settle in. This is a story about the hang that holds when family isn't defined by blood, but by bravery. Welcome, Connie.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Thank you for coming down. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your work with adoption.
Oh, for me, once adoption touches you, it doesn't leave. So for me, kind of an accident in the field, didn't plan on doing this for my career and didn't plan on adopting. But that's where I landed. And I found I was good at working with people. I worked for the state for many years in child welfare. And I just couldn't believe that we could have so many children that did not have families. I just did not understand that, how a child could sit and sit and sit. And then what happens to that child when they become adults and they have no attachment to anybody? As we know by the stats, the outcomes are very poor. But in getting to know these children, I started the Heart Gallery with Permanence in Pasco over 20 years ago with a small group of women over a bottle of wine because we knew that there could be better forms of recruitment for children. And we were doing, I think, Wednesday's Child on the TV station at that time. But as that grew, I got to know the kids. Florida was at a point they were privatizing all of their services, and we were losing just so much. As far as the quality of the workers, the experiences that they had. And so the kids just lingered from right before 2000 until I think Davion, it was for 17 years. I mean, Davion was born into the system.
Saw that. So Davion is one of the boys you ended up adopting.
Yes, I adopted him at 17.
Okay.
But not because I was out there looking to adopt. He was a child that I had known since he was a little boy. He had been in foster care. I had done several portraits of him for the Heart Gallery. I had taken him to recruitment events, and he was the sweetest kid. He would just give me this big hug, and I would be like, it was easy to love him. But I kept thinking, why is he sitting there? Is it because he's African American? Why? And what else can we do?
Yeah, what was the why? Because I watched so Connie has a YouTube video that talks about adoption and specifically her family and Devion and the other young gentleman.
Taylor.
Thank you, that she also adopted. So when I was listening to the video, my big question was, they had been through several foster homes, 35, I think Davion said.
Davion was 35. Taylor, who I brought into my home at age 12, had been at 47.
Already at age 12. So why? I mean, why were they not? I guess I wouldn't call it failures, but why were they not?
They were system failures.
System failures. Okay.
I'm going to put it back on the system because it's our job to not have that happen. Well, because it was privatization, they came into care and they kind of sat there. Permanency was not anything that the system was focused on at that time in Florida. And I believe Davion just got left in a home for like 6.5 years. His mother was non-existent in his case plan, but she was checking on him. He never saw her. She lived, we found out later, that she had passed away, but that she lived 10 to 15 minutes from the office. But he never got to meet her. She didn't do her case plan, and he should have been free for adoption about the age 2 if you go by the federal requirements. He was age 6.5 to 7. Okay. And for Taylor, I think it's behaviors, trauma. When children have behaviors, it's not because they're choosing to just be mean or to be, that child. They are just expressing their experiences and their frustrations. And it goes back to the trauma that they've experienced. In my boy's case, they have more trauma, and they say this of most foster children, than vets that come back from war.
Yeah, it's PTSD.
Absolutely. And they had a lot of diagnoses as every year they got older, they became more oppositional, there came a new diagnosis, there came a new medication. I honestly say that, we're just trying to control them in their placements. We're trying to medicate them to behave. The systems that they were in were geared behaviorally for them to improve. But who are they really underneath that?
Right. So is there a mental health component to the system or to the care they're getting in the system? So if they're in a group home, are they also in therapy?
I would say they have some therapies, although it is more of a behavioral type situation. They have an individual therapist, they have a caseworker, but until you're safe, if you think about this, until you are really feeling safe, you're not going to get through the therapy that you really need to get through.
Mhm.
And safe is really something that happens in adoption because finally you are at a place where you're not supposed to be leaving, although it takes years to realize that, right?
Oh, of course.
Um,
Of course.
and they're getting by. So today I must do this, and today I do this, and I shouldn't do that. So I do this. But are they ever really? I mean, we've improved their situation, but until children are in homes, they don't really begin to heal.
So you were a caseworker for Devion. We're going to take him first since we
Mhm.
brought him up. You were a caseworker for him when he was younger. Then I saw a part of the video where he went to church and stood up in front of the church.
Yes, I was over the program by that time, over the program for recruitment. So I was over adoptions and I had done the heart. Of course, we had the heart gallery happening and just kept thinking, what else can we do? And Davion, it was really interesting. I adopted Taylor first. They knew each other from being in programs together. So then Davion came over my house on the weekends and I convinced my bosses to let him come to my home for the weekends to have normal family experiences because I have found it is very hard for a child that is in a group home to adjust to family life. And I wanted him to see that it could work. And the boys got together. So we began to discuss at the dinner table, what would you do to be adopted? Davion, he just always wanted to be adopted. And he said, he would go to church. And I said, because he wanted me, he would have been comfortable staying with me. But I felt he needed a Black mom or dad. And I felt that I couldn't give him that. And so he agreed with me. That was our conversation at the time. And he stood up in front of the churches and he just said, I'm an orphan. This is my story. And I want someone to love me. And when you think about that, when the story went viral unexpectedly, and viral was just like, I've never seen anything go so
Yeah, it
viral.
was on the national news channels, right?
Up until this day, if he does something, it ends up on the news. Graduation from high school, from college, from, his documentary. And it's because that message was, I just want someone to love me. And
Don't we all?
yes, and that
Right?
is the key.
Yeah, and don't we all?
But right now we have over 100,000 children in foster care that don't have that.
Mm.
We have over close to, I think we're up to 800 in the state of Florida right now. It increased. These are kids who aren't going to learn what that value of that is. For someone to love me unconditionally, if I'm bad, if I'm good, if, grow up to be an amazing person, or if I go to jail. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what parents do. That's what
Yeah.
healthy adults do in relationships. How are they going to recreate that? So are we going to break the cycle? Or are we just going to just keep building on it?
You know what I think is fascinating about his story in particular is that he was born into the system. So he never knew his mom. He was given up for he wasn't even given up for adoption, right?
They terminated her rights in like about year 6. So
So
yeah,
he was taken from her when she gave birth. She had
she had some challenges. She had
challenges.
some drug issues. I don't know how diligently the system worked with her to address those issues, but at that time, I mean, she cleaned herself up later though. Davey and I have now met all of that family, and she's passed unfortunately, but you know, there's a lot of love in that family. We could have placed him with relatives very early. He just believes God had a different path for him. But the sad part is his trauma came from foster care. It may have started with his biological mother, but the system is where he was neglected. And the system was where he was physically abused and and sexually abused. His story, the things that he talks about and that happened to him happened in foster care.
Now, how is that happening in foster care? Are we not vetting our families well enough? How does that happen?
I think at that time, I'm going to go with that time and forward. I think you never know what goes on in a home. So you can vet all you want. I think that one visit a month is one visit a month from a worker. I don't think there are all bad foster. I think there are great foster parents. But I think that due diligence of child on child in group homes where they both ended up and where a lot of the abuse happened. Group homes are not a way to heal a child.
What's a group home? Explain that to
A
our
home where
listeners
there
that
are
might not know.
over 5 beds.
Over 5 beds would be called a group home. And
Yeah.
who's in charge of the group home?
Usually an organization. So staff change intermittently. For teens, it's something that's pretty common because there aren't foster homes.
Okay.
You
And how
know,
long would one normally stay in a group home? Is there an unlimited amount of time if they're not?
it could be your whole time.
Okay.
And if you have higher behaviors than a group home can manage, or a foster home that has more services, you then go to a psychiatric facility. Both my boys were in multiple psychiatric facilities.
Okay.
And you know what's really, really sad about this? And we'd probably need 3 more podcasts to talk about everything. But my son Taylor did really well after he turned his life around until his 3rd year of college. And then he began illegal activities with drugs. He began to sell drugs. And he came home during COVID, and that's where he stayed. He is recently heading into rehab on a jail sentence. First time he's ever been arrested, and he did it big. He had 15 felonies. He's an amazing kid. He could sell you the moon, strength-based philosophy, but what he was doing was wrong, and it was a really hard time for us. In talking to him now, he was sitting in the county jail for the first time, waiting to go into his year-long rehab. And I'm so grateful for this, that he's going there. And he said to me, Mom, I could handle this. You know, I was in so many places just like this growing up, meaning that it had prepared him. It's the foster care to prison pipeline. You go into a facility and you don't have to feel things. You function, you get your meals, you sit there, it's all controlled, and you just sit in it, and you get filled with anger. But he knew how to go there. And he said, I'll survive this. And it really broke my heart.
I can feel your emotion around that. So tell me more about what's happening for you
Well,
right now.
For me right now,
Yeah.
my kids I have 4 that I've adopted, 2 biological and 2 that I've adopted, and 1 that's my soul child. And I say that because she got adopted in foster care, but then she got put back in foster care, and we found each other as adults.
Okay.
And she lived with me the last 3 years, and she's in the same group as the boys. She knew the boys. So I have 3 27-year-olds. And then I have a 31-year-old and a Taylor's 25. He's the baby. Because when you see a child like this, you see the potential. You give them everything. You give them your heart, your soul. I took 10 years of my life or more. I didn't date. I just focused on them. I really changed jobs, did everything I could. And when they do great, it's wonderful. And when they struggle and things like this happen, you don't cut them off. I had to set boundaries during a lot of this. And I think that Taylor just has had my heart because I know underneath all that is this little boy. He's not, could he be a great criminal? Yes. But he's a dumb criminal,
Yeah.
And everything has consequences, and you can't protect them from that. You can't enable them from that. And so what I hear from him now is that he wants to work to do the rehab. He wants he wants a life. He has a child outside. And he found fatherhood, to touch him. He loves being a dad. How sad in every way. But I think that I pray that he continues to embrace what you have to do to live in society. The problem with these children too, as we go through this trauma, is their feelings get shut down. They don't connect. Taylor had it's called reactive attachment disorder that they labeled him. I think it's overgiven, but they said he would never attach to anyone. And I felt, because I had known him since he was 4, at 11, that he was connected to me. Because what happened is he got adopted when he was little with his 2 sisters. That family then placed him back in care and kept his sisters. He was 7.5.
I can't imagine.
And he was in those residential placements because he was an angry child. He had a lot of anger, and he was tiny but mighty. And I took it upon myself for those years to go see him once a week at the facilities. It wasn't my job.
You were just drawn to him.
Well, I was drawn to him, but I felt like he had nobody. Like there was no family here from the biological family. There was no family here from his adoptive family. He lost his sisters, who were 3 years older and 3 years younger.
Mm.
And he was labeled this like, and he knows that we talk about this, but he was like, they said he'd be the next like Ted Bundy.
Oh,
And I didn't, no, I'm going to tell you that I
oh,
sat at staffings as a professional and therapists would say stuff like that.
wow.
I didn't believe that. And so when he got out of his last facility, he was 11 and a half and he had a family and he went out to Seattle, but he was determined to break it down. And it lasted about 3 months. He'll tell you that. He tells that story really well. And he gives me permission to talk about his story because I'd much rather have him talk than me. But in that moment, I just said, he's my child. I've known him this long. I asked my one child that was at home, what do you think? She's like, you've been on the phone with that family every day in Washington. You're coaching them. He needs to come here. And that's what we did. Very difficult, definitely challenging. But you know what? He has a heart. He is compassionate. He has a healthy relationship right now with his girlfriend of the last 3 years and his child. And I can't ask for that, you know? Has it been easy? Absolutely the hardest thing in my life. But he has compassion and he's not the next Ted Bundy. But my feeling is if you don't show them that, would he have aged out of foster care? I kept envisioning him like becoming a sniper with no feeling, like in the military. And what a sad life to live. Instead, he came in and we loved him, you know, even through the hard times.
Yeah, that's not easy to do.
I claimed him as my son. I remember when he was getting on the plane to come home from the other place. And I just felt it in my heart, like, this is your child. And I remember arguing with God, like, no, I just bought a motorcycle. I'm divorced.
I'm
My
having
kids are given. I'm having some
fun.
fun. And I just knew that I had to do this.
So tell me about, you have 2 biological daughters.
Well, it's interesting for those who, one of
Okay.
my daughters became my son, and I have
Okay.
a trans child that is in Albuquerque and works as a social work and a teacher.
Okay, I wanna talk about that
So
too,
that's
but
interesting.
so born daughters,
Right?
and, how did were they supportive of you bringing these adoptive children into your family?
100%.
They were on
100%.
board,
Yes.
they wanted them to be part of the family?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the challenge was when you're in it and those dynamics begin to play out and there's jealousy happening and there's this,
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, I used to have, all my kids were high maintenance. So I'm like at night before I go to bed, it's like the whack-a-mole game, you know, you're making sure everyone has their needs met and everyone had unique needs.
Connie, all kids are husbands are too, by the way. So don't feel like you're alone.
It's so
in
much
that.
work.
It's so much work. Training them, training the dogs, the cats,
I love it.
all of them. Yeah. So I understand. Yeah, it's whack-a-mole. I know the game well.
It is. And so those were my years with them. But I think that you love them all to your capacity. They don't always get the same amount of things from you or time or this. And they don't always understand that. As adults, you hope that they learn to understand that.
Yeah.
You know, yes, I bought your brother 2 cars, but you didn't need the car because you had a job. So I, did this. And
Yeah.
it's never the same, no matter how hard you try to make it.
No, it's not. But the love is the same.
Yes. And
That's the thing.
it just multiplies. You know, people say that love, it isn't endless. It is endless. It just keeps multiplying.
So let's back up a little bit. You've dedicated over 4 decades to the world of adoption and child welfare.
I have.
So what first drew you into this work?
I'm an accident. I mean, I went to school for music. I was a professional flutist. I had my degrees. I taught. I played with the orchestra. I had a car accident. And how I had paid for college for the extras was I always worked in group homes. I worked in a psychiatric unit with adult schizophrenics. They said, we need someone to drive some of the mentally, the mentally ill adults around. I was like, I'll do it. I was like 23.
Oh my gosh. Okay, there's something there too.
It was so fascinating though. And
Yeah.
I think what fascinated me the most, I became a sponge, is that you would read these stories of their life. You'd read their files and, when the mental health would start and the things that were in part of their lives. And some people had until their 20s lived a very healthy life. And then all of a sudden schizophrenia hit and dealing with that mental illness and that they're in the system and they've been on the streets and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And so just a real compassion for people. And I was good with people. And so that became, by the time that the job opened up at the state of Florida, it was HRS then. I qualified. They grandfathered me in through my experience in teaching and mental health. Had no idea what I was doing. I had a great team and I loved what I was doing. So I owned it and continued as much, many classes as I could. And I just kind of, I think it's where I was supposed to be probably the whole time.
Yeah, I'm listening to you and I'm curious if there was ever a time when you felt fearful or afraid, especially when you're working in a psychiatric hospital with schizophrenics. Was there
I,
ever an incident where you're like, whoa, that was a lot?
well, yeah, there were plenty of those after the moment. I think
Okay.
in the moment, it's like you're dealing with it. You're working in the community with, I had one lady that was very had been off her meds. I went to check on her in an apartment. She was at the sink. She had the ice cubes and her hands were kind of shaking. And I'm saying, Betty, not her name. I'm saying, Betty. And she turns around, grabs a knife, and comes for me. And I remember knocking it, and she took off all her clothes and ran down the street. And afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, did this just
Yeah.
happen? Being in a car that you are in an area that's not a great area. I'm always smart and I'm cautious, but seeing that there's a bullet hole in your car when you get home. I
Mm,
mean, there's a million scary things, but there's so much value in working grassroots and learning your community from the top, from the bottom up, and embracing how do we change that community. And I'm involved in a lot of that. My office for my agency is in the heart of South St. Pete. We're at a community center where I'm on the board. We have a food pantry. We have all these different programs because resources need to be where people are.
right.
And
Yeah.
if I can't walk in that world, I can't walk in any world, is
Yeah.
how I look at it.
No, I love that. And a lot of our homeless society has
Mhm.
mental illness, right?
Oh,
Or it's
absolutely.
addiction or mental illness or both.
And over 70%, this is Connie's number, but I think it's more. When I've worked with the homeless, I see a connection to child welfare across the board. I'd say good
Mm,
70, 75, even 80% of them have touched that child welfare system. There's a fracture in their family, where they'd either been in foster care, raised by a relative, or just lived on that line of neglect.
that's interesting.
It
And it
is.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Kids that age out of the system, they have extremely high rates of a couple things. One is homelessness, pregnancy, no school, no employment. So you've just described John at the park,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and I've spoken to some other people about this topic, and the other thing they seem to be at high risk for is human trafficking. Have
Absolutely.
you heard that as well?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And she would let me say this too, my sole daughter, Sierra, that's what happened to her. I mean, she got put back in foster care from with her adoptive family. She was about 16 and a half, and then she got put with somebody up in a county, and she ended up on the street, and then she was trafficked for the next 4 years. And that's a horrible, I mean, I think it's more prevalent than we even know.
Yeah. How did she break free from that?
She had a lady that was in the neighborhood, and they saw each other at the mailbox. And one day, they made a plan, and she got in the car with her and left. Like, in the
So
middle
she
of the
told her.
day, she
Yeah.
told her, and that lady then took her to North Carolina. They ended up in, I wanna say it was Massachusetts, and then she went to a shelter there, and she ended up in Maine. She found me from Maine on Instagram after Davion's story broke. That's how she
Wow.
reconnected with me. And I'm very open on social media because I like to have anyone that I've ever worked with in foster care be able to find me. I don't have that separation. I just feel like I knew them then. Where are they now? And if I can help, I'm here. So whether it's adoptive families, foster families, or many of the kids. And so we began to talk, and she was pregnant, and I helped her do a pregnancy plan through my agency at that time. She moved back to Florida and floated through a few houses for a year or two. And then I had an open bedroom, and I thought, come on, because she was struggling. So she lived with me the last 3 years. She just moved out with her boyfriend. And she said it was the longest she's ever been in one place,
In her
27
27
years.
years, 3 years is the longest she's ever been in one
And
place.
she is the most loving, incredible. She still carries her trauma. I don't think she unpacked her suitcases for those 3 years all the way.
Wow.
Because when I went to help her get her stuff together, she still had suitcases.
Wow.
So, that's what trauma is. You don't know if you're going to have to leave. And I remember when there'd be like in my house, when there's a disagreement, we process it till it's dead. We take away the anger, we let everybody calm down, but we're going to be talking. And if it's late, still going to be talking. And I'll drive you crazy with that. And so the first time there was a issue, I think it was with Davion, because they knew each other in foster care. There was a disagreement. And she called me, and I came home, and she's ready to leave. She got everything lined up. I said, first of all, unpack your bags. You're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
She's like, really? I said, no, unpack your bags.
That's not how it works in this house.
And she was
Yeah.
like 23, 24.
So her knee-jerk reaction was to run
Absolutely.
instead of deal with the conflict.
And that has been her life. But I'm so honored that she let me love her and lets me love her, because she is an
Yeah.
incredible young woman. And, I want her to find her way.
And she will.
Yeah, I believe that. I
Yeah.
believe all my kids will. I have a couple others. They're not mine, but this is how you know that it's really sad. The system and aging out is that you hear from somebody that was on the Heart Gallery. They didn't get adopted. They aged out. They're like 29 now, and they're reaching out to you for $5 for the bus from another state. They don't have anybody. When you start to ask them, well, who are you? They're either bouncing from unhealthy relationships. So I think we owe it to these children to commit where it's hard, stay through it, and show them that, they're worthy of having somebody commit to them.
Now, you've mentioned the Heart Gallery a few
Yes.
times. Tell our listeners and our viewers what the Heart Gallery is.
Okay, so many, many years ago in adoption, we didn't have pictures of our kids. In fact, for me to show you a child, I would have a Polaroid of a child on a wall stuck on a piece of construction paper. And here's your child. Out of New Mexico, there was a lady, a photographer, who thought children were beautiful, and she began to photograph them and show them. That movement took over in our state. We have a couple galleries in this area that kind of all came up at the same area. One was Tampa, and us in Manatee, Sarasota. And, the agencies got involved. We really helped kind of build those up as nonprofits in the community. And those were kind of magic times because we gave a face to children, and children who had not been advocated for we were able to see that that they were just like your kid, you know? Um, I think what happened 2 years ago in Florida, one of our senators passed a bill that took all the pictures down. And because he felt like there were too many predators looking, and these are just face pictures, body pictures, there's not. They were predators that were looking. And we are still scrambling to find ways to show those children and find families. You have to, as an adopted family, it's very, very hard to navigate the system right now. But it's kind of like, I think at a certain age, children should understand and be able to commit to doing their own recruitment. That's the difference. And when they're little, I think we can keep them off the internet. And then if an adoptive family, has a study, can look at them. It's hard to match without a picture, I think.
Right.
I do it a lot with families. I help them navigate that. And we're like, well, there's no picture, but we've got some information. Let's go ahead and see.
So you're not even allowed to share a photo if someone's interested in.
If they have an
After the
approved
first-
study
Okay.
and can go into each site individually and register, which is a process. Some of them are connected in the state. We have a lot of heart galleries in Florida. I don't even remember the number, but it's like 11 or 12. So we have a lot. And they're not mandatory. They are all into these organizations that are just passionate about this. And so if they can get through, some of them are connected by a program called Child Match. Sarasota is. But some of them do things like blur the kids' faces. Another one puts pictures of their hearts. They draw on a heart. But it still isn't doing the right thing. And I think we need to look at that as a whole. Our state website, which is federally funded, is probably in the worst situation right now. You even professionals, I don't even have access to it. Although we've sent it up through the senator to say, why can't licensed child placing agencies look at these kids' pictures? We help. We haven't had a response yet. We're hoping that they adhere to some of these systems that we can. They only have right now, as of last week, one of my families who has access because they have a study, counted them, and there were 49 kids up. We have over 800. And I would say at least 400 kids should be, a lot of kids give you that number. Some of them are matched or in placement. So I'm going to take 50% of that and say we need to have them on that website.
Nationwide, I think you mentioned a number of over 100,000 children
Yes.
are in the systems looking to be adopted
At any time, yes.
at any time, from age range birth to 18.
The ones that are usually under the age of 3 or 4 are usually more profound in their disabilities, because children are usually adopted by their foster families, as you're in the very young ones. But yes, and most of them are teens, a lot of teens, but there's still this middle ground. But what makes me really sad is I look at, because I run a program where I sit with a family one-on-one, for an hour a week, and we navigate every system in the US that we can possibly get into.
Yeah.
And show them how to, do an inquiry, or sometimes they don't get any answers back. But if they have a social worker, do it for them or with them, they'll get an answer back. But you begin to look at these children's history, and they're identical to my boys. Kids that have been in the system too long, that have multiple diagnoses, all these different things.
Mhm.
And then, there are 3 levels, really a few of this low level type child that hasn't had a lot of trauma, right, in foster care. There's always trauma and loss, but they haven't had as many moves. And hopefully we're heading towards more children like that. And then we have the middle children, which I think are beyond adoptable. Like, we should have a home for all of them. And they don't have to be like my boys. My boys are what we call high end. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, that superwoman, but a lot of families with support can do that. But there's this middle ground of children that aren't, they're going to have loss, they're going to have trauma, they're going to have some behaviors, they're going to give you a run for your money, but you can do that.
Right.
And there's no reason for them to be sitting and sitting and sitting. I always say that a day for a child in foster care is like a month. If you think about it, if you're thinking there, well, how long am I going to be here?
Yeah.
Am I going to have to leave tomorrow? Oh my God, I didn't do my homework. They're going to make me go tomorrow. You're constantly in fight or flight.
Fight or flight. Yeah.
You're
Right.
over medicated. We know that because that's definitely a stat that's out there. I don't think that Davey was on no medications as an adult. He was on everything. He had health issues because of it. Taylor was on everything. And at the time he might have needed some, but he has permanent ticks in his eye from we're talking like
Anxiety.
Seroquel and
Oh, from the
Thorazine.
medication?
Medications, yes.
Oh, wow.
So it's lifelong issues that come from those medications.
Mm.
And although we're supposed to watch them, kids are overdiagnosed with ADHD. I believe in ADHD though. I've seen it in my home. It exists,
Yeah.
right? But if you're raising your child, you're going to say, well, let's cut out the sugar. Okay, let's cut out the red dye.
Oh, the
Okay, let's do
gluten,
organic.
right, exactly.
Okay, if a child comes in foster care, there are very few homes that are going to do that. There's no time. They have a caseworker. Okay, we're going to take them to the doctor. Medication, 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 medication. When sometimes that ADHD could be fight or flight. We don't know until they're in an adoptive home. And all of a sudden, 2 years in, they don't have it.
What's the ratio boys to girls that are in foster care?
I don't know that.
Yeah.
But I know there are more boys available for adoption.
Okay.
Girls get adopted easier.
Yeah.
Black boys sit the longest.
Mm.
Absolutely. I think that's a whole nother podcast, and probably with someone who could add to it.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that it is, as adoptive families head into this, knowing what number one, that they are able to have the strengths to do, and then where can they stretch and be comfortable with, and to look at all the different factors and to challenge yourself. I would certainly love to have more African American families step in, but we're part of the system, and there's just cultural things that have a lot to do with working with the system. And there's a lot of things to break down, which is why my agency is in the community.
So I'm surprised that there aren't more immediate family members that will take these kids in. You would think there'd be aunts and uncles and grandparents right?
I agree completely.
I'm like very surprised.
That's always your first tier. If you can't reunify, we find kin. That movement right now is huge throughout the US and throughout Florida. And we are cutting down on the removals. But what you have to look at, the two things, and doesn't matter race or not race, but we are a transient state. Other states are transient. What I'm seeing is that family unit is broken. So there are no grandparents here, and there are no aunts and uncles here. And with that, there's nowhere to place. I used to believe in it, and it was true. Like, Davion had 100 family members 15 minutes from the house, and he had a rough side of the family, and he had another side of the family. The system never looked at his family. He has a cousin who is a detective. He has teachers. We sat down at a family reunion because I found the biological family for all my children. And he, because you have to have all your pieces, and he hugged the lady across from us. And I went, how do you guys know each other? It was his third grade teacher. It was his cousin, his fifth cousin. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now the system failed in that. There's a new movement to look at kinship and look at that as, and we need to. I think it's extremely important because traditionally children do better with their kin, than a new foster home. So I think we have to continue that. But what I see are families that don't have units around them. And I'll use an example. I have been working on older children adoption, meaning there are cases that aren't in foster care that are in the community, and our families are struggling and they could go to foster care, but they're just on the edge. And I'll get a call and I'll say, I want to place my 6-year-old for adoption. And I'll be like, tell me more. And I go out and do this assessment. We look at resources. The average thing is they've been thinking about it for over a year. They've tried all their resources. They're all in the poverty level or just above it. And they cannot get what they need to stabilize their home, their housing, their jobs, and they're good parents. Like you start to really and they're like really good parents. So you assess some more and you talk to them. And what I realize is that they have nobody else. Like there's nobody to watch their child while they go work a late shift.
Yeah.
And that's what I see as growing right now.
So they'll give up their child for adoption
to have a better life.
so the child can have a better life because they're struggling. Yeah,
That-
that's heartbreaking.
I had 2 conversations around it this morning, and
Wow.
I have a beautiful little 6-year-old he's autistic and level 2. I found a matched family, and they have embraced the biological family. So they're all family, but they're going to raise him because they cannot get services. They make too much to get insurance. So they're over the cap for Medicaid by a couple hundred. They're barely getting by with their other child. And so they have been the best family to work with. They feel judged, all the reasons, but think about it, that you want more for your child and you've tried.
And you can't do it. So you're going to give them up.
They're going to choose to place them somewhere.
Pray that they have a better life.
And I think in this one, I'm at peace with, because I feel like this was an older couple that came in and they're kind of adopting the mom and dad too. So it blows my mind to think that. And I think the more that we step aside from services and the communities and things in our families, none of them have familiar support. That's the one common thing I see in all of them when I get a call like that.
That is powerful. That's interesting.
So in 40 years, I never saw that happening.
And now you're seeing it.
Now I'm seeing it happening this year.
Wow. So people are really struggling.
Yes.
So we've talked a lot about the system. Tell me a little bit about what happens to a child when they're going through the system. Walk us through that.
Well, people always say you don't understand foster care. You're like, well, we're giving them a better place to sleep, a better school. We have these things, but what they know is what they know. And whether it's neglect, which I think is so big, lack of food, lack of shelter, moving, physical abuse, sexual abuse, that's what they know. And their caretaker has been one person. So we come in and the call gets made. If there's enough evidence, they remove. So imagine being a child. From a child's perspective, you're sitting there and all of a sudden here comes the man with the black bag. Load your stuff in. We're leaving in 10 minutes. That's it.
Somebody's made a call and said that there's neglect in the home and the child has to be removed. So now the child's removed.
And they're plopped
at a stranger's
house, who could be very nice and have a bed for them, or it could be other. It just depends.
So do they immediately go to a foster family, or at that point are they in a group home?
I think it depends on
the situation,
on the area, the system.
Okay.
We have younger shelters for like a temporary stay. The problem with the foster homes, if they just had to find them for a night, that child could be bounced every day. That's a reality. My boys went through that when you don't have a permanent place. You go from home to home. Can you imagine going from home to home?
No, I'm just trying to understand that. So you're placed in a home for maybe 24 hours. So you're not going to school the next day. I'm trying to imagine that from a child's perspective. So you're going to this home. You don't know the person. It's a stranger. You probably haven't been given a lot of information because you might be 5 or 6 years old, right? You don't understand what's happening. So then 24 hours later, they're like, okay, well, now you're going to go to this other home. Why aren't they staying at the first home?
Well, that is getting better. So kudos to our system for addressing that. But because the federal government is measuring moves, how many moves a child has now. But those initial ones are really rough. And I think if they're younger, they have a better chance of going to one and maybe staying.
But if they're placed in a home tonight, for example, is it because the family chooses not to keep them there?
It may not be their
Or
profile. They may have had to waiver the bed and add a bed to their already existing. I think we're trying harder to address that because everyone's looking at that because that is traumatic, period.
yeah,
I
there's
think
no sense of normalcy. There's no routine anymore.
Mhm.
There's no
Everything's gone. And I think about my biological children, and I'm like, you would never survive. You would never survive that.
a lot of us wouldn't though. I mean, as we're talking about it.
Think about it. Everything you have is gone. You're too. I just can't imagine your stuff.
Right.
I think there are some places that have improved with that. But if you're a teenager or maybe 10 and up, 11 and up, you can guarantee you'll probably bounce. And if I don't know if you remember in our county, Pinellas County, we had an agency that's no longer there because they were in the office and it wasn't safe. There was just an article out last week in New Mexico. The kids actually sleep in the offices, like they've created the office environment. I can't even know how we're allowing that.
Yeah.
That's one of the worst states listed for child welfare is New Mexico. But how can we do that? Child on child incidences in those situations are extremely high. You're not safe.
Does it happen very often when a child is removed from the home when they shouldn't have been? Have there been mistakes made where
Oh, I think there are always
yeah,
the variables, because okay, so when you like the law piece of child welfare in a really simple way for people to understand is when you are charged with a crime, you steal a car, you have to be beyond a reasonable doubt. We hear that from our TV days, right?
right.
So you watch
Law and
that.
order. Yes.
In if you but in independency in child welfare, it's just like a pendulum. It just has to tilt enough where you have the ability to come in and for the safety of the child, lean it that way. It doesn't have to be beyond a reasonable doubt. There's not been a trial yet.
Right.
So there are instances,
Just need
like we saw
suspicion.
I think it was that horrible documentary about Maya.
Yes.
I will tell you, I knew the social worker and I don't have anything good to say. I mean, there's a lot of reality to that. Some of it's, I don't always, there's always two sides. But I will say that that's absolutely true. I've fought for adoptive families. Now, this is another topic. Sometimes when you have a lot of kids and you've got kids who have a lot of mental health, you can have a lot of issues. Neighbors can call, things like that. And I've seen punitive investigations where they come out and they say, well, you've adopted them, they're yours. And you're like, but I need help. I've seen that. It's one person in a moment of time that's standing at your house saying, no, they're going.
And there's nothing you can do. You don't have
No,
any rights in that.
no rights. And what I tell people is get your lawyer, but you better cooperate at 100% because they have a lot of power. And, but I know that there are rules that shouldn't happen,
Yeah. Does a child have any voice in that
if they're
decision?
older,
Only if they're older.
they might listen to them. Sometimes no.
I mean, both ways. Maybe they have a voice saying, I should be removed as well.
Yes. I think especially older,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like we have such mixed messages in our society. If you're parenting a child and you are trying to do it in a non-violent way. I don't just mean talking to them, but really invested in what you're doing with consequences as opposed to punishment. Say you have a report called in, the police come, you know what they say? This is huge. It happened to me with Taylor. I don't think you know how to parent. Why don't you just beat his ass?
What? That's what the police say to you?
Mhm.
Beat
I
his
had him
ass.
say it to me.
Wow.
I had him say it to me. Well, you want to put him in jail? Or you want to Baker Act him? I said, I want him to be Baker Act.
Wow.
And even then, my toolbox was empty. He'd only been with me like 2 weeks. And I was like, I don't know what to do because it was really tough. He was bouncing. He had been pushing on he was so dysregulated. I didn't know. And I do this work.
Yeah.
But he had the basketball on the wall. It was up to 3 a.m. and he was throwing it.
Yeah.
And I had put earphones on my other child and we're trying to cope. And I'm just feeling so out of control. So when I first called, that was the response I got.
I'm just, yeah, speechless.
Then he got aggressive with me. And the older me, more experienced me would have said, deal with it, Connie. But at that time, I was just so fragile as a new parent and they Baker acted him and he went there for a couple of days. They all knew him from before and he came home and that, it was like, that was not my best parenting moment.
Well, and before we move on, because I just learned what Baker acting was like 2 days ago. So could you please share with our listeners what that means when you say they Baker acted him?
Yes, it means that child or adult is at risk to themselves or others. And the policeman can do it or a therapist can do it or the facility can do it. But, it's really hard because to meet that criteria, they have to see it.
And when they're Baker acting him, they are removing the child and taking him to a
Facility.
mental health
Yes.
facility,
For
right?
like 72 hours,
Right. That's
like
the
to
max.
assess them. They have ex parte ones that you can go and fill out. Those are usually on adults to try to get them help. It's the need for mental health is another podcast. We could
I
line up your
know.
year
I
because
know.
families are trying, and when it's really, really bad, and it's hard to find the services. But the Baker Act, to think that it's used more as, I think, Connie's opinion, as a tool in the foster system sometimes because the foster home doesn't know what to do, and it's just black and white. Okay. In adoptive homes, we have to have our boundaries, but we handle a little bit. We should be able to handle a little bit more.
Mhm.
I just ended up calling my home the Baker Act facility because nobody else ever got Baker Acted again. But we had some crazy things happen, and my rule is if you're not safe and I can't see that you're safe,
Yeah.
then I have to call Mr. Davion, and he can share that story sometime. But I will tell you, he's good at hiding his medicine,
Okay.
playing those games, playing
Yeah.
those things. And because they've learned those behaviors. Taylor used to run away from foster care. He loved the helicopters looking for him. So, I knew that coming in, and I'm like, no helicopters today. He'd get,
It was a game for him.
absolutely. He'd get on his bike. He'd put his little backpack on. He goes, I'm leaving forever. I'd be like, well, I'm not asking you to leave. I love you. And the door will be unlocked. And I lived in like a neighborhood with like a, little family neighborhood. And he'd get on his bike and ride. And then he'd because he really wanted to be there. Yeah. And then he'd come in the back gate and he'd sit there and see if we were talking about him. And I'd be like, you can come in now, Taylor.
He was testing you.
Oh, every day. And
testing you to see if you would stay
absolutely,
or push him away.
always. And was I talking about him? And was I?
Yeah.
And I think it's taken a lifetime for that relationship to reach security. So that's trauma.
And it maybe never will fully.
No, I don't think. Yeah, you're right.
So you've been featured on The View, CBS On the Road, People Magazine, and more. What do you think resonated most deeply with audiences about your story?
Well, I think that maybe they could do it, that maybe they could be that parent. That's my story. What I think resonated with Davion's story was the fact that he said, Barbara Walters, who's so incredible, said to him, well, what is it you want people to know? He just said, I just want someone to love me. And that to me is like the purpose that love is the purpose that we're all here on this earth. And for to have this 15-year-old say, I just want someone to love me. Oh my gosh.
It's so vulnerable, especially from a young man to say, and a young Black man to say, I just want someone to love me, which means to see me, to make me feel like I belong, to not going to leave me, all those things. I mean, what love is, right? All of that safety.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think my stories and the pieces that I've been able to do and are just helping people understand that, the world is bigger than just your silo view, and find what you can do in it. If it's not adoption, then work with the heart galleries or get to know these kids, because they are our community, who are children that we have biologically are going to live with. And we want good human beings.
Over 40 years, have you seen the number of kids in foster care increase, decrease, stay the same?
I think privatization caused our highest numbers in Florida. A couple states, Kentucky is one of the worst. They have a very high rate. Texas is privatized, but they are really actively doing good adoptions. So I see that, anything, it can, but it's staying where it's at. It's not really going up or going down. It went down about 20,000 a few years ago, but I think that, data can be manipulated. So I have to look at it kind of like, and I've seen a lot of that in the system. So I think that we look at it like the fact that they exist at all. What I want to see now moving forward are ways to break down the barriers to get I believe the families are out there. I get calls all the time, getting those families to the children in a way that is supportive and educational and supportive forever, that we give them what they need. We educate them correctly. We don't just do a study or a class, that we are with them through the process. And right now that doesn't happen very often.
So, and Davion's story got national attention, maybe international attention.
It was international.
Was it international attention?
It's crazy.
So I'm shocked that he didn't. Were families reaching out to you wanting to adopt him during all that? Or what happened with that?
Because 10,000 families. That's the number.
Because I'm just like, wait a minute.
And the agency,
and he ended up with you. So I'm trying to figure this out.
Well, it's again, to me, it's a signal of the barriers and the brokenness. Because what happened is that 10,000 families. The agency that's no longer there, which was Eckerd at that time, they lost their contract eventually, but they were more concerned about the publicity than they were the child. And I say that it's a fact, and we experienced it. I, being over the program, was taken away from the program because they didn't want me to get any media. It was really crazy. They fought with me about going to The View, which was like 3 days after it went viral, only because they wanted to send their CEO. And only because, and this was my argument, you don't know him. He's therapeutic and you're not going, I'm a fireball, which is why I'm, a lot. And we held firm. So his mentor, Richard, and I went with him. Which was a good thing because he was playing a video game right before we went on stage, which is his way of disassociating from all his stuff. And and he was doing that. And I tapped him on his knee and said, okay, let's go. We're leaving the green room. He was like, what? I was like, take a deep breath, calm down. Yeah. Now we're going to do this. Every story that he has done as, under 18 and some after, it was I protected him. I let him go in his room. I cleaned my house, my little house. I can't believe I let people in it. And I was like, I put 2 chairs in the living room and all of a sudden there was Steve Hartman, or there was,
lights,
action. And Davion came, I did my little thing and then Davion came out and he just got to be Davion. And we did that for a long time. And then he got to stand on his own right before he went to college. And we flew up to New York. We were on Fox and Friends to talk about his graduation. And he got to sit next to her and it was live. And this is when he said, my dream's to go to the Culinary Institute. And then the Culinary Institute president called and said, well, we'd love to have you. Amazing. He was brave. He put that out there. Yeah. And then
Did he go?
Yeah, that's where he went 4 years. And you know what? He's brilliant. But I had no idea I had no idea that he was. I knew that he was capable, but I didn't know what might get in the way. And so as a mom, you hold your breath. Yeah. And you're going to be there to pick him up. And he pushed through it was COVID. It was, he actually played basketball there. I mean, he really came into himself. And I think he's still doing that.
Did he like getting all that attention? Because that came out of nowhere right after the church speech.
I don't think he knew because he was so protective. It was kind of small.
Didn't quite understand.
And so really kind of protecting him and keeping him safe and letting him be in charge of what he was choosing was, having him make his decisions, but yet still learn to live in my family, our family by then. It was a lot because times were tough. It was interesting.
Yeah, he was lucky he found you though and came back to you. So you said that 10,000 families reached out after all of that, and then
so they gave him one family.
Okay,
and that was the family he went with.
They gave him 1 out of the 10,000. Okay.
Yeah, but they didn't reach all the 10,000.
And
that would have been the system, the agency.
Okay. The agency.
And because people were calling anyway, they could, anyone, they were calling me, they were calling the reporter, because it was just all these families. Some of them needed studies, some of them, but the ones that had studies, there had to be a good portion of them that did. It would have been nice to have really given him some choices in that, but he went with, as he says, I went with the first family they gave me and I went, okay, whether it was the right match or not, I don't know. Being prepared for trauma takes a lot. They were told, by then I had left the agency and they were told not to contact me, but they found me on social media and they started to message me and tell me things. And they were told.
The family now was telling you.
The family was telling me what was going on. And so I was giving them, coaching them, well, if it's not that he's ignoring you because he's on his game. That's where he's safe, right. But it was too much for them. And I think, he had, in order to live, it's like getting married. You have to be your real authentic person with your spouse. Think about it. You date, you look a certain way, you live together, and all of a sudden it's hard.
All of a sudden you're getting up in the morning with your hair out to here
you're going,
and some weird stuff on your teeth. Your breath doesn't smell that great. You see the good, bad, ugly.
And so I think for Davion, I told him he would know his family when he could take off the mask.
Yeah.
And be who he was. So what happens is he came back from that. That was world news again. It was literally on the world news.
What that he did?
Davion only, foster child. It was HIPAA information. Shoves foster dad. Oh yeah, back to Florida. It was like, because
all of a sudden it makes the foster care kids look bad.
Right.
He's like a poster child for difficult foster children.
Right. And so he got put in a home in Tampa. He didn't have a phone. He got a phone after a little while, and then he called, he called Richard, he called me, and he said to me, He said, Miss Connie, would you adopt me now? And I was like, yes. I mean, how do you say no? It was, and I said, but we have to do it differently. I said, I'm asking you not to tell anybody except Richard. And I said, I'm going to go get a private home study and an attorney. And because I knew that that agency would rather see him age out than be with me.
Why?
I rocked some big boats. I held them accountable.
Okay.
And I didn't want that to affect him. If I was going to step into this, I had to be able to adopt him.
And how he was 17 when you adopted him?
We finalized he was 17. By then he was like 16 and a half.
Okay.
And so he went to court about 3 weeks, 4 weeks after that. And they said, and Mr. Davion, what are you going to do? And he said, Miss Connie's adopting me. And it was like dead silence. It was great from everything I hear. And then we moved forward,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, and he was a good advocate for himself. He did a great job with that. So,
Wow. You know what? I do want to talk to him because I am just so impressed with him, with his story and your story. And so Taylor, right?
yes,
He is now, is he still in jail?
he's due any day to go over to Phoenix House in Ocala.
Oh,
So I'm
good. So
excited
he'll
about
be in
that
rehab.
for a whole year. And then he has some probation.
Excellent.
And I'm very hopeful. He's been clean since January.
Yeah.
He did outpatient.
Great.
And I've watched him slowly stop, trying to manipulate the system, because that's just a behavior from, how do I get around this?
Yeah.
But now there's a lot more ownership and the need to be a dad. If your ultimate goal is to be home and be a dad, then this is what you do.
Does he have a boy or a girl?
He has a boy and he has a girl on the way.
Oh, he's been
Yes.
busy.
Yes.
So you're a grandma.
I am a grandma. Yes.
Oh, they live nearby.
They're in St. Pete.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you've seen both the heartbreak and the hope within the foster care system. What do most people misunderstand about adoption, especially for older children?
Oh, I think that they come to it with, I'm going to save a child. And honestly, and I say this whenever I speak, is really your children save you, even when it's difficult. I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to be their mom, even in the hard times. And even as the hard times as I'm parenting them as adults. I don't know the quality that my life would have. I don't know that I could help other people unless I had walked there. And I think that's my purpose, to be here. I think people thinks that adoption, we've been painted the rainbow and lollipop, white picket fence story for a long time. Adoption is not, if you can live safely with your biological family and you are safe and then that is better than adoption. And if you can't do that, kinship might be the option. Adoption is built on loss in every avenue. It's built on loss for the birth mom, for the adoptee, for the adoptive parent, because we go into it, we have these ideals, expectations. Well, I try to take expectations off the table because I can't tell you that a child that comes into your home that is genetically from somebody else, you can give them the best environment in the world, and you should, but will they be like someone who's going to be a doctor? Maybe they'll be a chef. Maybe they'll be this. I think you have to believe in that, but you also have to be realistic and be okay with where they land. Yeah. The fantasy of, the blind side fantasy and all those things. There's a lot of that. And you have to really just address those head on.
Yeah.
You know?
It's parenting in general, though. I just feel like, I have 2 children and then I'm remarried, so I have 3 bonus children. And yeah, they all have challenges,
Yes.
right? And I think as parents, you do have to be, we love unconditionally and through the hard times and the good times. And I call it the messes and the milestones. That's my term, right? We're with our kids and our partner through the messes and the milestones.
I
We
love that.
celebrate with them and we cry with them. And so, we're only human too as parents, right? As adults, we don't know. We weren't given a manual, right? And as long as we can show up and be authentic and vulnerable and show them that we make mistakes too,
That's so true.
right? I mean, we're not perfect. I'm not. Let me speak for myself.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
And families, those are the families who should adopt. Those are the families who I can help, that are willing to get help, that are, it's when you go into the Facebook fantasy.
Right.
And I have to tell you, I have a support group just for adoptive families. It's closed. And I literally, on the first day of school, everyone posts their pictures. And then I send a message out and I'm like, okay, tell me the real story. And then I get all the pictures and stories on the other side. And I'm like, you have to have a safe place to share those things.
Absolutely.
And be okay with that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I've always, I try not to tread on my children because they are their stories, but I love being able to say, well, there are a lot that happen. We have no idea what goes in people's homes
Right. No.
and what people are dealing with, and the creative, parenting is like you have a toolbox, and sometimes it's empty. Sometimes you got to put more in,
Yeah.
and creativity is the name of the game.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that parents in adoption and parents in general can find joy in that creative parenting piece. Like I got that one, you
No,
know?
but I love that you've created this community because it's so true. Because I don't think any of us want to admit that we forgot to pack our kids' lunch today, or
That's
that
right.
kid was calling me every name in the book, and
Oh my
I didn't
gosh.
know how to deal with it, right? And so
Mhm.
I don't think any of us want to admit that we're not perfect parents,
Well, society holds you to certain levels.
right?
And then in the adoption world, you're held to a higher level.
Mm.
And that's what I've seen over the years is, well, you adopted them. And you're like, well, it was just a home study. I mean, I'm same as you, but no, you should have done that better. And I think that letting them adopted families be real and understand, but yeah, that is a fallacy that's out there.
Really, because I would think being an adoptive parent would be so much more challenging for all the reasons you just mentioned. All the trauma that is coming
Yes.
in, and you haven't known them since birth,
No.
especially if you're adopting an older child.
I don't think the world really goes that deep. They think of it as easy. It's you put a bow on the package. The package may have some wrinkles. You straighten them out, you tape them up and put the bow on. Isn't
Like,
life wonderful? I'm like, no, you got to open it up and deal with what's in there. And then I find parallels between like biological and adoption. There's a lot of parallels in just your struggles because trauma, you've got these horrible traumas for foster kids, but maybe you go through a divorce. That's trauma. And nobody recognizes that that trauma for that child is as much as this trauma, even though they're totally different.
right.
And so, sometimes I'm like, yeah, my biological kids were a handful. Nothing was easy in my life. And I wouldn't trade any of them. But it is just like we have to be easier and gentler with ourselves and the people that we can care about
Yeah.
because there's too much of societal expectations.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you have a daughter that was transgender,
Yes. Yeah.
now a son. How did that conversation come up, and how did you work through all that?
That was COVID.
It's
Graduation
COVID.
from college. Basically, Carly,
Yeah.
was Carly at the time. That would be their dead name. And I went into the bedroom and they had just graduated on Zoom, which was just so devastating. And it was the middle of the night. They said to me, I want you to know something. And I'm thinking, okay, well, and they came out as that they were gay in college. I was just happy they had a partner. Like,
Yeah.
yes, finally, because they hadn't dated.
Okay.
And nothing kind of led me to think this way of that they were more masculine or anything. But as we got to that moment in time where they told me, it just made sense somewhat. They just said, I've been thinking and I need to tell you I'm transgender. And half of my brain's going, okay. The other half is going, okay, what does that mean again?
Yeah.
I need to look it up. I don't know anything about this.
Right.
And I said, well, okay, what do you need from me?
Oh, what a great response.
you know? And they said, would you help me like vlog it? Would you help me video the changes?
Okay, wait a minute. I have to stop for you listeners. I want to just go back to that. Connie said, when her daughter at the time said, I'm transgender, not gay, I'm actually transgender, your response was, what do you need from me? That is the most beautiful response. I wish every parent would respond that way
I do
because that's
too.
beautiful.
Well, if we're really authentic in who we are as parents, this is borrowed time, and it's not about us. I know I do want us to take care of ourselves. Okay. I'm not saying that, but I have a sign in my bathroom that I made for myself. And it says, this is not a reflection of my parenting
Hmm.
because again, expectations of what people think. This is their journey. Did I understand? No. But what do you need for me to do? How can I help you? You have to get into their space and just sit in it. And then they're able to tell you what they need. And is that too much for me to do? No, because it's not about me. Meanwhile, when I left that room and went to my room, kind of numb, about 4 a.m, I was on my phone looking everything up. What does this mean? What does that mean? And of course, they then made it their mission to teach me everything. And watching them transition and grow and become their authentic self I can't tell you, you just want your child to be happy. So when you see them truly become and explain what they're struggling with, the body dysmorphia and what they've always struggled with,
Mm.
and understanding it instead of judging it or trying to change it or saying it doesn't fit my religion. It's not about that. It's their life. You've done your work. And I don't know a lot about anything under 18, but I can tell you that Charlie was what, 20, 21. And he said, I've been to counseling. I've done this. He had already done all the work. And knowing him, I knew he would have.
Mm.
And he says, I've been processing this for a couple years, but it's time for you to know because I'm ready to start testosterone.
So you referred to Charlie when he was Carly, and Carly is now his dead name.
Yes.
So I just am curious, did you as a mom go through a period of mourning where you had to mourn Carly and
I
then
mourned a lot.
accept Charlie?
I had moments, but it was really hard when they're living with you to give yourself those periods because you're dealing, and I had everything else going on during that time. But in the moments that I allowed myself over the years to think about, oh my gosh, there's no white dress going down the things that you think about, the little things, the name, I love that name. I just I would start to grieve and I'd feel it. And then I would say, okay, time to move on there. This is not about you. And I just
Yeah.
give myself that affirmation and pep talk because I wanted Charlie to live. And I knew that Charlie had struggled with a lot of things that he didn't talk about. I didn't know. It was like that one child who was the overachiever,
Mm.
luditarian, blah, blah, blah. And then underneath, you knew they were depressed, but you didn't know how to help them.
Right.
And I thought, well, this may be the answer to help Charlie. And him and a friend from college researched all the states in America where to live. And they chose Albuquerque because it had all this, and this. And his first job there was running a shelter for transgender youth and gay youth that were homeless in the community.
Wow.
And so all those stories from parents, he had to listen to, he dealt with those parents. And I can't even imagine what it's like. I don't understand what it's like to try to control your child when they're of an adult age because you have to let go and you have to be there for them to catch them. There's not another option that's going to be healthy. You cannot control.
How's he doing now?
He's doing really well. I just talked to him last night and I get so
Aw.
excited. He has a partner who is what they would call non-binary, but a female at birth. I don't understand it all, but I have more fun going to stay with them and sitting in their space because it's so uniquely different than my space. The way they process, just their generation is interesting.
Correct.
To sit in that space and listen to them make decisions of how they're going to get a roommate. They're going to have a game night. They're going to bring somebody over and play Monopoly. And that's how you're going to pick them for a roommate, but understanding that world and in its pain and and especially now, I'm just so glad that they're where they're at and that their weight is a little bit less.
I love that for him. You've been recognized as a congressional angel in adoption. What was that experience like? And what did that moment represent for you?
That was incredible. And it was actually about Taylor, the family that had him in the other state. I worked for a year to get him with that family. So it was really interesting that this story came out. He was still with them. And so the story continued after it. But for me, it was just such an honor that somebody took the time to write a nomination. Just say, because you do so, you don't expect anything. You just don't.
Yeah.
And so when those things come, it's really nice.
Yeah.
So I was very
just
excited.
To be recognized for your hard work.
Yes.
I love that. How can everyday people, not just social workers, help change outcomes for kids in the system?
Get involved in the communities that may not be your communities. They may surround your community. Step outside of your world and understand what's happening on a grassroots level. And we're so polarized right now I would really love to see that. Not just, it's good to go to the galas and do all those pieces. I love that because we need money. Okay. We need all that. But I want you to feel a little bit what I feel. And I think that's why I'm so open because I just have to believe that if you were to meet that homeless person that you are saying we can't have on our streets and you were to hear their story and you can't lump people together. Everyone's an individual what's going to touch your heart? We all have our touch points. One could be homelessness. One could be mental health. One could be adoption. One could be foster care. Pick one. Work on it in your community and get to know what's going on in the world. So that's how I like to see things.
Are there certain organizations that you recommend people, if they want to meet the children or get involved directly with the kids that are
Well,
in, like, if
in
they're not
foster
able
care.
to adopt,
Oh, I
maybe.
think learning to guide them.
Oh, just,
Absolutely.
yeah, we just did a podcast on that.
I love them.
Yeah.
Our, Avion's guardian was a lifesaver. He was amazing.
Is that a big commitment though? Because I've looked into that myself, maybe becoming a volunteer. And what's the time commitment really
Mhm.
like?
I think depends on how much you invest. Training, you do your training, I don't know how many hours that is, and then take one case. You'll see the child once a month. You might want to see him more though. See, it depends type of person you are. I'm an all-in person, so I'm like, they now have released restrictions where you could drive a child to piano lessons. Invest yourself in that case and first of all, learn the system, and then you may have a staffing to go to. Learn how it all works. I think it's probably one of the best things that you can do, or mentor. I stand by Big Brothers and Big Sisters, but there are other mentoring organizations too. So there's not just that one. It's, what Davion's mentor is still like his dad, still in his life, still invested. I think we have to invest ourselves in people.
Absolutely. All right, couple more questions for you, and then we're going to wrap it up. Okay. What has adoption taught you about love and about letting go?
Adoption for myself has taught me that love is absolutely, you're able to love um, anybody you choose, that any child, any situation, you can step into your fear and work through it. Your fear as a parent, your fear. And when you keep working at it, you are changing someone's life. So you don't have to adopt a lot of kids, one at a time. I think for me, adoption is, like I said, I'd much rather children didn't have to be adopted, but that's not happening. And so I just can't stand the thought of souls sitting out there by themselves. And so if we can help make those connections, we're changing the world. I think adoption taught me that. And what was the last part?
About letting go.
Oh, I learned that right in the middle of it. I had my children that were biological. I brought in Taylor. I was like, okay, is this my circus? Yeah, these are my monkeys, but that is not, I did not create that behavior. I did not, and so being able to separate that. And also, I couldn't set boundaries at all. I was horrible at setting boundaries, and I learned how to set boundaries more as my kids became adults.
Yeah.
I am a very creative, free throwing, flowing parent. And I definitely am not that overstructured one. And my children probably would have appreciated a little more structure.
What does setting a boundary look like for all the parents out there that also feel they're not setting boundaries? What's setting a boundary look like
Okay,
for
so
you?
I had two rules in my house.
Okay.
One was respect. Now, I don't mean militant respect. I mean, respect covers yourself and me. Try to respect yourself, meaning that you brush your teeth, all those things. Take care of yourself. Respect for your room. Pick it up occasionally. I didn't pick battles like that. I didn't say your room must be this must be that. Nah, didn't do any of that because those were not my battles. I had bigger battles.
Right. But you set a standard of respect is expected.
Right. So respect and have a purpose every day.
That's a good one.
So having a purpose every day for children, especially teenagers, is going to school is a purpose. If you don't go to school, you need to go to work. Getting a high school diploma, important. I will help you get there. And, Davion took an extra long time at the end because he was done, even though he was on target for college. He just stopped. Again, purpose, because life isn't just video games, smoking pot and doing video games. You know what I mean? There's so much more. And what is your purpose today?
I love that. So that's going to lead good into this last question. Finally, for our listeners, what's one joyful act they can do this week to support connection, belonging, or family in their own communities?
I think reach out and ask the questions, where you're comfortable, but also where you're a little uncomfortable. You've been in the supermarket where somebody's struggling with their kids. You're thinking, well, should I offer to do this or do that or take the child and give them a break or just smile at them?
Yeah.
The fact that I know there's more to their day than just this moment. So I like to think about when I wake up, whose life is going to change? Whose life am I going to change today? And who's going to change my life?
I love that. That's a day led with intention, right? Every day. I love that. Well, what a powerful conversation. Connie has reminded us that connection isn't just a feeling, it's a commitment. It's choosing to show up even when the story gets messy. So your joyful act is to reach out to someone who's parenting, fostering, or mentoring a child and simply tell them you see them. Offer encouragement, a listening ear, or a small act of support, because behind every strong child is a village of hearts that refuse to give up. If this episode moved you, please share it with a friend or tag us at Joy of the Hang. Together, we're building a community where love lasts and no one hangs alone. Thank you,
I love
Connie,
that. Thank you.
for being with me. Thank you.